Imagine a man chained in darkness, surrounded by 6 raging beasts bred for death, horns like jagged blades, eyes burning with hellfire. He should have been torn apart. But when the gates creaked open after 3 eternal days, he emerged untouched. And those monsters? They bowed like lambs before a shepherd. Yet this was no mere miracle, it was a reckoning, a whisper of divine fury against the sins of the mighty. What ancient power stirred in his veins? And why did 20 more beasts forsake their pastures to follow him into oblivion, leaving a tyrant's corpse twisted in unholy terror? In the shadowed heart of 1847 Georgia, where the air hung heavy with the scent of pine sap and damp earth, a story unfolded that blurred the veil between mortal toil and celestial wrath. This was no fable spun from idle tongues, but a chronicle etched in the ledgers of history, whispered in churchyards and slave quarters alike. A tale of bondage, beasts, and a quiet rebellion that echoed like thunder from the heavens. At its center stood a man named Ezekiel, once called by another name in chains, but reborn in the fires of trial. And opposing him, a lord of the land whose hubris invited the judgment of Old Testament fury. Picture the landscape: vast expanses of cotton fields, white bulls blooming like ghosts under the relentless sun, bordered by ancient forests where twisted oaks draped in Spanish moss guarded secrets older than the Republic itself. The Withlacoochee River snaked lazily to the west, its waters murmuring tales of escape and peril. Mosquitoes droned in the humid twilight, a constant hymn to the suffering below. Plantations sprawled like kingdoms, each ruled by men who played God with whips and ledgers. Here, power wasn't just wealth, it was the ability to crush souls, to bend nature and humanity to one's will. And no one wielded it more cruelly than Baron Elias von Haar. Von Haar wasn't forged in American soil. He hailed from the fog-shrouded ports of Amsterdam, arriving in 1828 with coffers swollen from the blood-soaked spice routes of the East Indies. Whispers trailed him like smoke, workers vanished in Java's jungles, ships swallowed by storms laden with stolen clothes and nutmeg. Rivals met untimely ends, poisoned chalices at banquets, duels rigged with tampered pistols. In Europe, doors slammed shut, society shunned him as a pariah cloaked in finery. But the American South? It welcomed him with open arms, where a man's past dissolved in the heat of opportunity, and slavery's iron grip mirrored his own ruthless soul. He claimed a dominion near Valdosta, 3,500 acres of fertile red clay, where cotton thrived and men withered. The main house loomed on a knoll, a neoclassical monstrosity with Doric columns gleaming white against the verdant chaos, verandas wide enough for pacing tyrants. From his mahogany-paneled study, von Haar surveyed his realm, rows of clapboard shacks huddled like frightened children, barns groaning under harvests, and to the east, a fortified enclosure that pulsed with primal menace, the bull pen. Ah, the bulls. Von Haar's obsession wasn't mere fancy, it was a sacrament to his ego, a living altar to dominance. Influenced by the blood-soaked arenas of Seville, where he had witnessed matadors dance with death, he imported the fiercest strains: Andalusian toros bravos, Portuguese touros de lide, beasts engineered for arena slaughter, their hides scarred from mock battles, muscles rippling like coiled serpents. He named them after fallen angels: Lucifer, the massive charcoal brute with horns curving like scythes; Belial, a tawny giant whose bellow shook the ground; Asmodeus, sleek and red-eyed, quick as sin. These weren't cattle for milk or plow, they were weapons, symbols of unbridled fury that von Haar paraded as extensions of his will. The workers called them the infernal herd, crossing themselves when passing the pen. For these bulls had tasted blood, human blood. The first kill came in 1844, under a harvest moon. A handler named Josiah, seasoned from Virginia tobacco fields, entered to mend a trough. Lucifer charged without warning, a black shadow exploding from the gloom. Hooves thundered like Judgment Day, horns gored deep into Josiah's abdomen, spilling life onto the straw-strewn earth. His screams pierced the night, drawing a crowd that could only watch as the bull tossed him like a rag doll, ribs cracking like dry branches. By dawn, Josiah's body lay mangled, eyes staring blankly at the indifferent stars, a warning etched in gore. 6 moons later, tragedy struck again. Young Caleb, barely escaped from boyhood, was fetching water at dusk. The trough's edge splintered under Belial's assault, the bull's head thrust through, jaws clamping on Caleb's leg. Flesh tore with a wet rip, bone splintering as the beast dragged him against the bars. Blood sprayed in arcs, mixing with the mud. Rescuers pried him free, but infection bloomed like poison ivy. Feverish nights of delirium, whispers of demons in his ear. He perished in agony, his final breath a rattle that haunted the quarters. The third death sealed the pen's cursed legend. Elias, a grizzled veteran with hands calloused from decades of labor, approached Asmodeus to salve a festering wound. He moved with the grace of one who knew beasts' tongues, soft murmurs, eyes averted. But touch ignited apocalypse. The bull reared, hooves descending like divine hammers, crushing Elias's skull with a sickening crunch. Blood pooled dark and sticky, seeping into the soil as if the earth itself thirsted for vengeance. Witnesses swore the other bulls watched impassively, their eyes gleaming with otherworldly intelligence. Von Har responded not with remorse, but fortification. Iron spikes crowned the posts, chains thickened like serpents' coils. Feeding chutes allowed sustenance from afar, no man dared cross the threshold. The pen became a bastion of isolation, a microcosm of the plantation's terror. For Von Har ruled not with brute force alone, but a serpent's cunning, psychological torments that eroded the spirit like acid rain. His domain housed over 250 souls, most in chains, their days a grind of dawn-to-dusk toil under the overseer's lash. Dalton Graves, a wiry specter from the Carolinas, enforced order with a bullwhip that sang through the air, leaving welts like crimson scripture. Von Har, ever the puppeteer, delighted in games of false hope, promising manumission to the hardest worker, only to revoke it on whims, citing ungratefulness, or forcing kin to compete for scraps, breeding resentment like weeds in fertile soil. His wife, Isabella, a faded beauty from faded Dutch nobility, drifted through the halls like a ghost, her eyes hollow from unspoken horrors, her letters home laced with veiled pleas. Rumors spoke of a midnight flight thwarted by threats, her spirit caged tighter than any bull. Amid this hellscape walked Ezekiel, a man whose presence parted the veil of despair like Moses' staff. Bought at a Savannah auction in 1842, his papers curt, male, mid-30s, field laborer. But origins whispered deeper truths. Some claimed African birth, stolen as a child from Yoruba lands, where shamans communed with spirits of beast and storm. Others swore American soil, mentored by a conjureman versed in rootwork and biblical incantations. His eyes, deep pools of obsidian, held the weight of ages, seeing sins unspoken, futures unwritten. He spoke sparingly, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder, carrying authority that unnerved even graves. Ezekiel's gift was communion with creatures great and small. Stallions that bucked riders knelt before him, nuzzling his palm as if seeking absolution. Hounds, bred for hunting runaways, whimpered and rolled at his feet. In the fields, serpents slithered past without strike, birds perched on his shoulders, singing psalms only he understood. Von Har exploited this, assigning him to stables where he mended broken spirits, horses lame from overwork, colts wild with fear. Ezekiel lived apart, in a lean-to by the barn, his evenings vanishing into the woods. There, under canopies of ancient pines, he prayed not to the whitewashed god of plantation sermons, but a fiercer deity, one of justice and retribution, echoing Job's trials and Daniel's lions. One twilight, as Ezekiel tended a mare birthing under starlight, the stable master and elder freedman, named Jeremiah, probed his mystery. "Boy, you got the touch of angels, or something darker. Where it come from?" Ezekiel paused, hand on the full slick flank, its breath syncing with his own. "Ain't angels or devils, Jeremiah. It's kinship. Beasts know the yoke same as us, fear chewin' at their hearts, pain whippin' their hides. Show 'em mercy, and they mirror it back. Like the good book says, the merciful man doeth good to his own soul." Jeremiah nodded, chills racing his spine. "And who taught you that mercy?" Ezekiel's gaze pierced the shadows. A father lost to the sea. A mother who sang spells against the night. Gone now, but their fire burns in me. Von Har sensed this flame, viewing it as threat veiled in utility. He summoned Ezekiel for troublesome stock, watching with narrowed eyes as beasts submitted. But envy festered, how dare a slave wield power unbound by gold or whip? This simmered like a pot on coals, awaiting ignition. That spark came on a sultry May Eve in 1847. Von Har hosted a gala for the South's elite planters with empires vaster than nations, merchants fat on cotton profits, lawyers twisting laws like vines. The air buzzed with anticipation, servants scurried under Graves' glare. The banquet hall glowed with candlelight, tables groaning under pheasant glazed in honey, venison stewed in burgundy, pies bursting with pecans. Crystal clinked, laughter rang hollow. Von Har, flushed with wine, regaled with tales of exotic conquests, mocking Yankee moralists as fools. Post-feast, men adjourned to the study, brandy swirling in snifters, cigar smoke curling like incense to false gods. Emboldened, Von Har proposed a spectacle. Gentlemen, behold my throne of thorns, the arena where beasts bow only to me. They ventured into the night, lanterns bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps, past silent shacks where ice peered from cracks, hearts pounding with foreboding. The pen loomed, a coliseum of wood and iron, bulls pacing within, shadows massive and malevolent. Von Har boasted, Lucifer, slayer of the unwary, Belial, crusher of bones, Asmodeus, swift as vengeance. But agitation stirred. Lucifer pawed the earth, dust rising like smoke from brimstone. A snort, then a charge thudding against bars, fence quaking like earth's bones. Guests paled, brandy spilling. The herd joined, a symphony of rage, bellows deep as abyssal calls, horns clashing iron in sparks. Von Har feigned calm, mere theater, sirs. They sense weakness. But fear flickered in his eyes, a crack in the facade. Then, from the stable's gloom, Ezekiel emerged. Drawn by the chaos, bucket in hand, he approached unwittingly. 20 paces away, and the storm ceased. Bulls froze mid-stride, heads lowering in submission. Silence descended, profound as a cathedral hush. Guests gasped, Von Har's face twisted in fury and awe. What sorcery was this? A slave commanding demons? In that moment, seeds of retribution sprouted. Von Har's humiliation burned like brimstone before peers, his symbols of power knelt to a bondsman. Vengeance brewed, dark and biblical, a trial by beast, echoing Daniel in the den, but twisted to hubris's design. Little did he know, this would summon not lions tamed by angels, but a procession of judgment, beasts marching as harbingers of doom. The air thickened with omen. Crickets chirped a dirge, winds whispered warnings. Ezekiel stood unmoved, his presence a beacon or a curse. Von Har's voice shattered the quiet, You, what devilry do you wield? But Ezekiel met his gaze, silent as stone, eyes reflecting the Baron's sins like a mirror to the soul. Thus began the unraveling, a tapestry of guilt, grace, and ghostly allegiance that would haunt Georgia's annals. For in that pen, not just survival awaited, but transformation, bulls as apostles, following a prophet into legend's maw. And Von Har? His locked study would become his tomb, face etched in eternal scream, a testament to pride's fall. Divine justice, patient and inexorable, had arrived on cloven hooves. Pause for breath, building suspense. Voiceover fades with echoing bull low, visuals lingering on Ezekiel's silhouette against the pen, bull's eyes locked on him in eerie devotion. But to understand the miracle or the malediction, we must delve deeper into the nights that followed, where isolation bred revelation, and beasts whispered secrets of redemption and wrath. In the veiled mists of that fateful Georgia morning, where the heavens wept steady tears upon the scarred earth, the plantation awoke to a spectacle that would etch itself into the annals of the unseen world, a confrontation not merely of flesh and fury, but of spirit and retribution. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of impending storm, thunder rumbling low like the growl of judgment from on high. Cotton fields lay sodden, their boles drooping like penitent heads, while the Withlacoochee River swelled nearby, whispering prophecies of flood and renewal. This was 1847, a time when the South's grand illusions of mastery cloaked the rot of moral decay, where men like Baron Elias von Har built empires on the broken backs of the bound, blind to the divine scales tipping against them. Recall the eve prior, the Baron's gala, a veneer of civility masking barbarity, shattered by Ezekiel's unwitting arrival. As the bull's rampage quelled at his mere presence, a hush fell heavier than any bellow. The beasts pivoted as one, their colossal frames rippling sinew under hide scarred like ancient battlefields aligning toward him. No snorts of rage, no pawing earth, instead, a profound stillness, breaths sinking in rhythmic harmony, eyes locking with his in silent communion. It was as if the veil between man and creation parted, revealing a bond forged in the fires of creation itself, reminiscent of Noah commanding the ark's inhabitants or Daniel amid the lions, tests of faith where the meek inherit not just earth, but dominion over its wild hearts. Von Har's countenance darkened like storm clouds gathering, his cheeks flushing crimson against the pallor of his starched collar. The guests, silk-clad specters of privilege, exchanged uneasy glances. Colonel Harlan Whitaker, portly and brandy-flushed, chuckling nervously to pierce the tension. "By heavens, Baron, your bondsman wields more sway over these devils than their master. Perhaps he should lead the grand tour henceforth." A jest, light as summer breeze, yet it landed like a thunderbolt, igniting the Baron's latent inferno of pride. The air crackled with unspoken peril, laughter died on lips, replaced by the chill of foreboding. Whitaker stammered retreats, no slight intended, merely admiration for such a peculiar talent, but the wound festered, raw and irrevocable. For Von Har, this was blasphemy against his self-anointed godhood. A slave, a vessel of toil, had unwittingly upstaged him before peers whose alliances buttressed his throne. Humiliation coiled in his gut like a serpent, birthing venomous resolve. His gaze pierced Ezekiel, who stood rooted, bucket dangling forgotten, his expression a mask of stoic awareness, not terror, but a quiet acknowledgement of the cosmic wheel turning. Eyes met, the Baron's, stormy with wrath, Ezekiel's, serene pools reflecting the Baron's sins back upon him, like the biblical mirror of conscience that exposes the heart's hidden darkness. "Ezekiel," Von Har intoned, voice slicing the night like a whip's crack, "approach." The command echoed, drawing all eyes. Ezekiel complied, steps measured across dew-kissed grass, posture bowed in feigned deference, yet an undercurrent of unyielding dignity rippled beneath. The bulls tracked him, unblinking, their calm a stark counterpoint to the tension coiling among the men. Halting at the fence's shadow, Ezekiel awaited judgment. "You possess an uncanny affinity with beasts," Von Har observed, words laced with sarcasm, a probe for weakness. "Sir, I tend them daily, I've come to know their spirits," Ezekiel replied, voice steady as ancient oaks, evoking the humility of prophets who veiled their power. Von Har sneered, repeating, "Know their spirits? How quaint. Colonel Whitaker posits you command my herd better than I. What say you?" Silence from Ezekiel, a void wiser than words, for any response invited peril. The guests fidgeted, silk rustling like leaves in wind. "Fairfax, the silver tongued advocate, ventured, 'Baron, the hour grows late, perhaps we retire?' But Von Har dismissed with a wave, eyes alight with malice. "Nay, the night's revelation dawns. Gentlemen, witness a proposition befitting this enigma." Turning to Ezekiel, he proclaimed, 3 days in yonder pen, amidst my infernal guardians. No sustenance, no refuge, merely you and their untamed wrath. Endure, and freedom is yours, plus $50 silver wealth to forge a new life unbound." Gasps rippled through the assembly. $50, a fortune rivaling a freeman's yearly toil, dangled like forbidden fruit. Yet the price, certain annihilation, given the bull's bloody ledger. Whispers of Daniel's den stirred in minds, but twisted here into a tyrant's mockery of divine trial. "And should I decline?" Ezekiel queried softly, voice carrying undertones of foreknowledge. Von Har's grin widened, predatory, "Then your gift proves illusion. You'll be dispatched to Alabama's hell fields, where labor devours the soul swiftly. A year, perchance, before you break. A snare, elegant in cruelty, accept and perish, refuse and suffer exile's slow death." Yet Ezekiel, gazing upon the bulls, now statuesque, as if awaiting his decree, nodded assent. "I embrace the trial." Von Har's facade cracked momentarily, surprise flickering like lightning, swiftly masked. "Dawn it commences. Let the plantation bear witness, a lesson in humility." The party dispersed under starlit skies, footsteps heavy with disquiet. None challenged, to defy was to court ruin. Yet in their hearts, seeds of doubt sprouted. What if survival defied logic? What spiritual force stirred? Word cascaded through shacks like wildfire in dry brush, whispers in candlelit corners, elders recounting African lore of spirit walkers who communed with ancestors through beasts. Jeremiah, the stable sage, sought Ezekiel in his humble alcove, lantern casting elongated shadows on plank walls. "Flee, son, paths exist for the shadowed escape." Quaker. Allies, hidden trails. Ezekiel, seated on a straw pallet, shook his head. Flight invites wrath upon all. Von Har's vengeance knows no bounds. Jeremiah pressed, "Then you march to slaughter?" Ezekiel's eyes gleamed with ethereal certainty. "I enter the arena of trial. What transpires, the Almighty decrees." Men like Von Har, blinded by hubris, forget, pride goeth before destruction.
This pen may yet reveal whose spirit reigns.
Dawn broke gray and foreboding, clouds veiling the sun like a shroud, rain pattering a somber dirge on tin roofs. Von Har decreed assembly. Over 200 souls converged, a semicircle of silent witnesses, field hands in ragged linens, faces etched with suppressed empathy, overseers, rifles slung, whips coiled like serpents, house staff peering from verandas. Isabella observed from afar, hand clutching a crucifix, her pallor a canvas of inner turmoil. Von Har, resplendent in brocade waistcoat, positioned at the gate, graves beside with keys jangling like chains of fate. Last night's guests lingered, reluctant spectators to this theater of cruelty. Ezekiel emerged, escorted yet unbound, garb simple, faded trousers muddied from toil, shirt threadbare, boots worn from endless miles. He met Von Har's glare unflinching, aura radiating quiet power, evoking Moses before Pharaoh. 3 days, 72 hours, Von Har boomed, voice echoing like a false prophet's decree. Survive, claim liberty in coin. Fail, well, hubris invites its due. Forced chuckles from henchmen rang hollow. Graves unlocked the gate, chains clanking ominously, hinges groaning like tormented souls. Ezekiel stepped through, threshold crossing like baptism into ordeal. The gate sealed with finality. Tension coiled, breaths held. Bulls stirred, eyes fixing on the intruder. Ezekiel centered himself, eyes closing, palms open, posture of supplication, invoking psalms of protection, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. The crowd leaned in, hearts pounding. Lucifer, the ebony colossus of prior slaughters, tensed, head dipping, hooves scarring soil, muscles bunching for onslaught. Murmurs swelled, a child's wail pierced, swiftly silenced. Von Har leaned forward, anticipation twisting his features into a mask of sadistic glee. The charge erupted, Lucifer thundered forth, earth quaking under his fury, horns gleaming like instruments of damnation. Inches from impact, Ezekiel's eyes snapped open. A utterance escaped, not shout, but resonant hum, vibrating like earth's core, blending ancient tongues with biblical cadence, echoing peace, be still from stormy seas. Lucifer halted abruptly, physics defied, hooves skidding in mud, breath exploding in clouds. Mere feet separated them, beast quivering yet subdued, gaze locked in reverence. The assembly gasped, a collective exhale of awe and terror. Von Har gripped bars, knuckles blanching. The remaining bulls converged, not in assault, but pilgrimage, forming a sacred ring, heads bowed as if in worship. Ezekiel extended a hand to Lucifer's brow, touch gentle as a healer's balm. The bull yielded, eyelids fluttering shut, leaning into the contact with sigh-like exhalation. Tension evaporated, the circle tightened, beasts moving with grace unnatural, like apostles guarding their Messiah. Von Har's composure fractured, impossible, they'll turn yet. But hours unfolded in defiance. Ezekiel alternated stances, standing vigilant, seated in lotus repose, pacing deliberate circuits. Bulls shadowed, maintaining vigil, no hint of malice. By noon, rain intensified, yet the crowd thinned only at command, guards rotating with reports of the uncanny truce. Von Har inspected thrice, each visit darkening his scowl, hands clenching iron till veins bulged, eyes boring into the scene as if willing carnage. Night descended, lanterns flickered like watchful eyes, illuminating the pen's tableau, Ezekiel meditative at core, bulls reclining outward facing, a living fortress against encroaching shadows. Sentinels in shifts, ice-piercing gloom, evoking angelic hosts encamped. Von Har observed long into witching hours, retreating wordless, face haunted, as if glimpsing his soul's ledger, debts mounting under divine scrutiny. Day 2 dawned in deluge, mud sucking at boots, chill seeping to bone. Guards anticipated Ezekiel's frailty, hunger gnawing, exposure weakening. Yet he stood exalted, arms outstretched embracing the downpour, face uplifted in ecstasy, as if baptized anew. Bulls encircled, bodies shielding gusts, creating sanctuary amid tempest, a living tabernacle, symbolizing shelter in storm, much like the ark amid flood. A housemaid, Eliza, wept witnessing, he shone with liberty's light, caged yet unbound, freer than masters in mansions. As morn advanced, ritual emerged, bulls processed in synchronized orbits around Ezekiel, steps harmonious, pausing in unison, a dance primordial, evoking tribal ceremonies or Levitical rites, directed by invisible conductor. No gestures from Ezekiel, merely presence, aura commanding as Moses' staff oversees. Von Har arrived midday, disheveled, eyes rimmed red from sleepless vigil, attire askew. What sorcery, he snarled to Graves.
Unnatural, sir, like enchantment, Graves muttered, invoking whispers of witchcraft, though fearing the word's weight. Von Har paced, rationality demands explanation, subtle cues, perhaps ultrasonic tones.
Yet observers discerned none, the bond transcended mortal ken, hinting at spiritual kinship, beasts recognizing in Ezekiel a steward of creation's harmony, lost since Eden's fall. As sun waned, unease permeated the plantation, workers murmuring of signs, overseers gripping talismans.
Ezekiel's vigil persisted, a beacon of resilience amid adversity, challenging the Baron's dominion not with rebellion, but quiet defiance that mirrored Christ's temptations in wilderness. Von Har retreated to his study, shadows lengthening like accusations, the weight of impending justice pressing like the storm's unyielding rain. Yet the true miracle or malediction loomed, for in this pen of trial, bonds forged deeper than chains, setting stage for an exodus biblical in scope, where beasts would march as emissaries of retribution, and a tyrant's locked chamber become his sepulchre of terror. As the relentless Georgia's sun climbed higher on that fateful second afternoon, the pen transformed into something akin to a sacred shrine, an altar where the boundaries between man and beast dissolved like mist before morning light. The rain had softened to a persistent drizzle, turning the enclosure into a quagmire that sucked at boots and hooves alike, the air thick with the earthy scent of wet soil and primal musk. Ezekiel stood unmoved at the center, his form a pillar of serenity amid the chaos he had tamed, clothes plastered to his skin, yet radiating an inner fire that no storm could quench. Then came the moment that would sear itself into the souls of all who witnessed. Belial, the scarred tawny titan, once a whirlwind of destruction, flanks etched with battle wounds from distant arenas, approached with deliberate reverence. The massive bull lowered its horned head, pressing its broad forehead against Ezekiel's chest in an act of profound submission. Ezekiel responded, placing both palms upon the beast's skull, fingers splayed over coarse hide still warm from the fray. They stood thus for nearly an hour, motionless statues in the downpour, breaths aligning in perfect, hypnotic rhythm. Inhale, exhale, chests rising and falling as one organism, a communion deeper than words, evoking the biblical harmony of creation before the fall, when man named the animals and walked among them without fear. The remaining 5 bulls ceased all movement, frozen in vigilant stasis, their dark eyes fixed upon the tableau as if beholding a holy rite. No snorts, no shifts of weight, only silent witness to this transference of spirit, this bridging of worlds divided by cruelty. When at last Ezekiel withdrew his hands, Belial retreated with a single shake of its mighty head, rejoining the circle. The others resumed their orchestrated procession, slow, synchronized circuits that now pulsed with renewed purpose, a ritual dance under heaven's weeping gaze. Ezekiel sank cross-legged into the mud, face uplifted to the rain, eyes closed in tranquil meditation, as if drawing sustenance not from bread or water, but from the divine wellspring that had sustained prophets through wilderness trials. By twilight's descent, whispers had escaped the plantation's iron boundaries like spirits fleeing captivity. Neighbors arrived on horseback, drawn by tails carried on the wind, merchants halting wagons, field hands slipping messages across fences. Von Har, sensing the erosion of his carefully curated dominion, barred the gates, posting armed sentinels to repel the curious. Yet containment proved futile. Stories are wild things, untamable as the bulls themselves. They leaped borders through kin networks, tavern confessions, churchyard murmurs, morphing with each telling. Some hailed Ezekiel as a latter-day Daniel, anointed by God to humble the mighty, his gift a sign of impending jubilee for the oppressed. Others feared darker arts, conjure rooted in African soil, pacts with shadow spirits that bent nature to vengeance. A few saw prophecy, a harbinger warning that the sins of bondage cried out for reckoning, echoing Exodus plagues upon Egypt's proud. In the grand house, as lanterns flickered against encroaching night, Von Har barricaded himself in his study, a mahogany sanctum lined with ledgers of human commodification. Brandy flowed like blood from a wound, his wife's tentative knocks rebuffed with snarls. Servants, moving silently through corridors heavy with cigar smoke and despair, overheard his unraveling, mumbled soliloquies escalating to shouts, "Impossible, mine, he steals them from me." Young Amos, tending hearth fires, froze at the door, heart pounding as the Baron's voice cracked with uncharacteristic terror, "He's taking everything, everything I own." A man who had orchestrated suffering without remorse now quaked before an unseen accuser, his conscience perhaps manifesting as phantom adversary.
The third day broke radiant, clouds parting like the Red Sea to reveal a sky washed clean, sunlight gilding the mud-slicked pen in ethereal gold.
Ezekiel rose renewed, mud-caked yet invigorated, eyes sharp as flint, movements fluid as a panther's prowl.
No trace of deprivation marred him. If anything, trial had refined him, forging frailty into unbreakable resolve, much like Job emerging from ashes restored. The bulls mirrored this vitality, their circuits now infused with exuberance, heads high, tails flicking in what seemed joyous cadence, a celebration of liberation glimpsed. Von Har approached at dawn's first blush, flanked by a phalanx of overseers, rifles primed, faces grim. Sleepless nights had hollowed him, cheeks gaunt as a penitent's, eyes sunken pits reflecting inner torment, hands trembling like leaves in gale. He gripped the fence, staring into the pen's sanctified space.
Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. "How," he finally rasped, voice raw. "How do you command this?" Ezekiel met his gaze evenly. "I command nothing. I simply am."
They sense truth where chains have bred only fear.
"Lies." Von Har spat. "They've slain men, my men." "Trickery, confess it."
"No trick," Ezekiel replied softly.
"Merely understanding."
"Pain recognizes pain.
Bondage knows its kin. Have you ever sought to know them, or only to break them?"
The words struck like divine indictment, echoing Proverbs, "The merciful man doeth good to his own soul, but he that is cruel troubleth his own flesh." Von Har recoiled, pallor draining to ashen gray, then surging crimson.
"Insolent cur! You are property, nothing." "If nothing," Ezekiel countered, voice steady as bedrock, "why does this nothingness unravel you?"
Words failed the Baron, rage-choked retort. He fled, abandoning overseers to awkward vigil, his retreat a crack in tyranny's facade.
As morn yielded to noon, anomaly escalated to apocalypse.
From eastern fringes came reports, deep, resonant calls rolling across pine-scented expanses, not rage, but summons, ancient and irresistible. Fences splintered, bulls from Hutchinson's domain, 5 prime specimens, marched forth, ignoring barriers as if mere illusions, drawn inexorably westward. Hutchinson thundered to the gates, apoplectic, "Your witchery steals my stock."
They shattered reinforcements, heading for that infernal pen.
Von Har, summoned, blanched at the tally. Attempts to intercept failed, whips cracked harmlessly, shouts dissolved into void. The beasts proceeded undeterred, gazes fixed on a distant beacon. Only they perceived a spiritual homing, reminiscent of migratory herds following unseen paths, or perhaps the animals sensing a redeemer who embodied their suppressed wild freedom. By vespers, convergence swelled, 3 from southern Crawford, 4 from western Pembroke's Widowhold, 2 from northern smallholdings, 14 in total, converging at gates in serene assembly. No clashes, no dominance displays, merely patient vigil, all oriented toward the pen, eyes gleaming with shared purpose.
Owners descended in fury, demands for restitution, accusations of lures or poisons.
Von Har, from veranda shadows, offered only hollow denials, "I know not.
I know not." Alliances frayed, voices rose in threat, the South's brittle hierarchy splintering like dry timber under this unnatural strain. At Vortex's heart, Ezekiel, seated in mud, the original 6 orbiting as devoted sentinels.
Night cloaked the estate in oppressive quiet, broken only by Von Har's pacing, brandy decanter emptying, mutterings devolving to pleas.
Isabella breached his sanctuary, "End this madness, Wilhelm."
"Free him, honor your vow before it consumes you wholly."
He whirled, eyes wild, "Free him?"
"He robs me blind, my herd, others." "To yield is to proclaim defeat by a slave's hand."
"This transcends power," she implored. "It's devouring your soul."
But obsession deafened him, she withdrew, leaving him to darkness's embrace. 72 hours culminated at fourth dawn's tender light, sky ablaze in rose and amber, as if heaven itself heralded deliverance.
Multitudes assembled, enslaved in hushed reverence, overseers tense, aggrieved owners, even townsfolk drawn by legend.
Von Har fronted, pallid spectre amid armed guards, orders hissed, "Shoot if charge ensues."
Graves unchained, the gate rattles echoing like judgment's gavel.
Creak of hinges, breath collective held. Ezekiel rose gracefully, the 6 mirrored, unfolding in harmonious grace. He advanced, they trailed, not heard, but disciples, filing through in solemn order, forming semicircle behind him, heads bowed in fealty. Path cleared instinctively, murmurs swelled to awed silence. Ezekiel halted before Von Har, gazes locking, one serene with ancient wisdom, the other fractured by hubris's weight. Von Har averted first. "Remove him," he muttered. But distant bellows crescendoed, the 14 summoning kin. Gates yielded, they processed inward, encircling the 620 now, a living phalanx of cloven-hoofed guardians, calm as a congregation at altar. Gasps erupted, owners reeled. Impossible. They belong to themselves, Ezekiel proclaimed, voice resonant yet gentle, carrying like prophetic decree. Always have. You merely forgot to ask. Von Har raged, property like you. I was, Ezekiel acknowledged. Your wager promised freedom. I endured. Now I claim it, and they choose freely. Shoot. Von Har shrieked, desperation peaking. Rifles wavered, none fired. Graves cautioned, your word, serve witnessed. Break it, and trust dies forever. Trapped in his own snare, honor meant humiliation, dishonor, ruined. Von Har crumpled. Fine, freedom and coin. Vanish. Documented, Ezekiel insisted wisely. Lest hunters claim thee fugitive. Papers drafted amid tensioned manumission scroll, signed with quivering hand, witnessed by bewildered elite. Water and bread offered, Ezekiel partook sparingly, bulls vigilant. Graves queried softly, whither now? Ezekiel gazed eastward, to primordial forests whispering invitation. A place of peace, for us all. He strode forth, 20 followed in majestic procession, some flanking, others guarding rear, a biblical caravan evoking the animals entering Noah's Ark, or perhaps a new covenant where the meek lead the mighty. Crowd parted as Red Sea, hands extended in silent benediction, tears tracing cheeks unspoken. Hope flickered in chained hearts, this exodus a harbinger that chains might yet shatter under divine gaze. Yet as they vanished into wooded vale, shadows lingered over the plantation. Von Har retreated to his study, door locked against the world, and perhaps against the terror blooming within. For judgment, patient as roots cracking stone, had only begun its inexorable work. In the golden haze of that July morning in 1847, Ezekiel walked away from bondage without a backward glance. The dirt road stretched like a ribbon of red clay, dust rising softly beneath his worn boots and the heavy, deliberate tread of 20 bulls. Sunlight filtered through towering pines, painting long shadows that danced across the earth, his own slender silhouette at the forefront, flanked by the colossal forms of creatures once symbols of terror, now guardians in solemn parade. The air hummed with birdsong and the distant rush of the Withlacoochee, yet an unnatural hush cloaked the procession, as if the forest itself held its breath in reverence. From the grand veranda of his crumbling empire, Baron Elias von Har watched, fingers digging into the polished rail until splinters bit flesh and knuckles gleamed bone-white. His face was a battlefield, rage warring with dread, pride crumbling beneath a deeper, existential horror, the realization that the foundations of his world had shifted irrevocably. Beside him, Isabella reached out, her pale hand resting on his arm, whispering futile comforts. But he was blind to her, transfixed by the receding figure until man and beasts dissolved into the treeline, swallowed by emerald shadows. In that moment, something inside Von Har fractured, like the first crack in a dam holding back a flood of reckoning. Word of the exodus spread like wildfire through parched grass. From slave quarters to taverns, churches to cotton exchanges, the tale grew wings. Newspapers in Savannah and Augusta printed cautious accounts, hedging with phrases like alleged phenomenon and possible exaggeration, yet the core remained unshakable. A bondsman had tamed death, claimed freedom, and led 20 bulls into legend. Preachers thundered from pulpits, one faction hailing Ezekiel as a modern Moses, parting seas of brutality through faith, another damning him as a conjurer wielding forbidden African rites, a warning against the heathen soul. Naturalists scribbled frantic letters to scholarly journals, proposing theories of pheromone signals or hypnotic tones. Yet eyewitnesses, dozens of planters, overseers, and enslaved souls stood firm. They had seen. They knew. The fallout struck Von Har like successive plagues. Neighboring owners, robbed of prized stock, descended in fury, Hutchinson, Crawford, Pembroke, demanding recompense. Your sorcery lured them, they roared. Von Har denied, voice hollow, they chose.
Lawsuits bloomed like poisonous nightshade, bleeding his coffers dry across endless courtrooms. Social doors slammed shut, invitations withered, whispers trailed him like smoke, the man bested by his own slave. Once a titan among peers, he became a pariah, isolated in his palace of echoes. But the deepest wounds were unseen. Obsession consumed him. Days blurred into nights poring over dusty tomes, treatises on animal magnetism, forbidden volumes smuggled from New Orleans on rootwork and obeah, yellowed pages of scripture marked at Daniel and Job. He summoned conjurefolk under cover of darkness, pressing coins into trembling hands for answers that never came. Lantern in hand, he wandered moonlit grounds, lingering at the empty pen, now a scarred crater of mud and memory, whispering to ghosts, how? How did he steal what was mine? Sleep fled, appetite vanished. Workers spoke in hushed tones of the master pacing corridors, eyes wild, muttering of eyes in the dark. Horses shied from his touch, dogs cowered, crops yellowed in fields once lush, as if the soil itself recoiled from his sins. Isabella pleaded through tears, "Let it go, Elias. It devours you." But control had been his god, and Ezekiel had toppled its altar. If a slave could command creation's wild heart, what remained of his dominion? What of the entire edifice of bondage built on broken spirits? 6 weeks post-Exodus, a traveling preacher staggered into Valdosta's tavern, voice quaking over whiskey. Deep in the pines, he had stumbled upon a hidden glade, man and bulls in perfect harmony, grazing as one. I sought to save his soul, the preacher trembled, but his gaze pierced mine, ancient and knowing. The beasts encircled him like sentinels of Eden. I fled, certain they would trample me at his whisper. Von Har seized the tale like a drowning man clutching driftwood, convinced of dark rites. He plotted hunts, bounties, confrontations, yet paralysis gripped him, plans dissolving into fevered ramblings. Visions tormented his waking hours, bulls at windows, breath fogging glass, eyes glowing like coals in hellfire. He watches, Von Har would hiss, pressing forehead to cool pains. Ezekiel sees my soul. They all see. Servants exchanged fearful glances, Isabella wept in private chapels, crucifix clutched white-knuckled. 3 months to the day, on a sweltering July night thick with cicada song, Von Har retreated to his study. Business, he barked at Isabella's concern, locking the door with finality. The house fell silent, save the tick of grandfather clocks and distant owl calls. Dawn revealed horror. Knocks unanswered, graves summoned. 3 men battered the oaken door until lock splintered with a mournful crack. Inside, the Baron slumped across his desk, head cradled in rigid arms, body cold as marble. No wound, no poison, windows barred from within, an impossible crime scene. Yet his face, oh, his face. Eyes bulging in frozen stupor, mouth agape in a scream that never sounded, every muscle etched in primal, soul-shredding terror. Nails had carved bloody crescents into palms, brandy glass untouched nearby. The physician, voice hushed, heart ceased from sheer fright. As though he beheld the abyss itself. Beneath one stiff arm lay a single sheet, scrawled in frantic ink. They're here, 20 strong, outside the window. Motionless. Watching. Waiting. Ezekiel stands among them, calm as Judgment Day. He sees through walls, through flesh, into the black pit of my sins. Their breath clouds the glass. Their hearts thunder like the wrath of God. They remember every lash, every death, every crushed spirit. They will not leave. They wait for me to join them in the dark. Forever watching, forever. The pen trailed off, ink bleeding like a dying pulse. Men scoured the grounds, pristine grass, no prints, earth baked hard. Yet 7 workers, unprompted, confessed to midnight echoes, deep, resonant bellows encircling the house, neither angry nor mournful, but inexorable. Ruth, the cook whose hands had fed both master and slave, spoke softly. It was memory made sound. "We know what you did," they said without words. "Justice does not forget." The funeral was a sparse affair, awkward silences beneath magnolias, preacher skirting the Baron's torment. Isabella fled to Holland within months, selling the plantation for a pittance. He lost himself, she told kin, eyes haunted. Obsessed with a truth he could not bear. New owners came and went, each fleeing crop blight, dying livestock, nocturnal unease. The grand house decayed, columns cracked like broken teeth,
verandas sagging under kudzu's embrace. By the 1870s, timber barons razed the forests, foundations sank into red clay, the family plot vanished beneath vines, von Haar's name erased by time's indifferent hand.
Ezekiel? He dissolved into myth.
Travelers through the deep woods spoke of hidden glades, a man ageless, weathered, skin-kissed by sun and spirit, seated in perfect circles of grass, 23 bulls, some swore more, grazing in reverent quiet. Surveyor Thomas Whitley's 1851 journal endures, a clearing no map could hold. He looked upon me with eyes that had transcended pain, eyes of pure grace.
The bulls regarded me as gatekeepers. I understood, this was sanctuary. I did not belong. I left, and the glade was gone forever. To the enslaved and their descendants, Ezekiel became hope incarnate, a quiet rebellion proving dignity unbreakable, spirit untamable. To others, a ghost story whispered to misbehaving children. Yet all agreed, something profound transpired, witnessed, documented, undeniable. Even today, in those same remote Georgia backwoods, hikers pause at midnight. Distant bellows drift through pines, neither threat nor lament, but reminder.
Clearings appear where none should, circles of flattened grass, no tracks in or out, only the lingering weight of ancient eyes watching, waiting, remembering.
What did von Haar truly see in his final breath? Guilt's phantoms? Or the patient procession returned, silent sentinels of divine justice? Was Ezekiel a prophet gifted by grace, or a man who simply remembered creation's original language, mercy spoken to the broken? Did the bulls follow instinct, or recognize in him a kindred soul unchained? These questions linger like mist over the Withlacoochee, unanswered, unanswerable. The plantation is dust, witnesses, bones.
Yet the crack Ezekiel opened in reality remains, a fissure where the impossible bleeds into the real, reminding us that cruelty carves debts into the soul, and some reckonings arrive on cloven hooves, patient as time, inexorable as thunder. The world is deeper, stranger, more connected than our ledgers and laws admit. Some mysteries are not puzzles to solve, but mirrors held to our own hearts.
Ezekiel took his silence into the wild, guarded by 20 shadows that understood.
And in the quiet of night, when conscience stirs, we still hear them watching, waiting, remembering.